ሰላም እንዴት ናችሁ? ሄርሜላ ባልቻ ነኝ ከባልቻ ግሩፕ። ዌልካም ቲ-ቶክ ሪል ስቴት ቲ-ቶክ ኤፒሶድ 14. I'm so excited. የዛሬው ደግሞ በጣም ኤክሳይቲንግ የሚያደርግ ነው which is appraisal. appraisal ማለትም የቤት ግምት። ስንገዛም ቤቱን እናስገምታለን፣ ሻጭም ደግሞ ቤቱ ስንት እንደሚያወጣ ለማወቅ ያስገምታል። ያን በምናደርግበት ጊዜ ምን ነገሮች ናቸው የቤታችንን ዋጋ የሚጨምሩት? ምንድን ናቸው ዋጋችን የሚቀንሱት? እንዴትስ ነው የቤት ግምት የሚገመተው የሚለውን እናሳውቃችኋለን ዛሬ። እንደገና ከደረስ ከዲ ሃሪስ ከእሱ ጋር ነኝ ያለሁት። So here we are.
በጣም እናመሰግናለን ዛሬ ስላገኘናችሁ። It's very exciting to have an appraisal topic. D Harris with D Harris and Associates. Very excited to have you. እና ደስ ይላል። እንኳን ደህና ለዚህ ያደረሰ።
And today we have Gus. I'm super excited to have Gus. He's knowledgeable. He's been doing this for a very long time. So, Gus.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Gus Taci. I'm owner and operator of Alpha Appraisers. We serve DC, Maryland, and Virginia for the last 12 years.
Oh, wow. This is exciting. So you're very familiar with the DMV area, which is fantastic because obviously we're real estate agents in the DMV area. Most of our clients and viewers are around here. What is appraisal?
That's a good question. A lot of people misconcepted with home inspection. I'll walk into a property and the person will say, we had the inspection appointment at so-and-so and you're early or you're late. Well, it's not an inspection. And so there's a difference in that. And a lot of times people mix up appraisal, home inspection, assessor. Those three things are completely different. So your home inspector will come in and check the functionality of your mechanicals, the condition of your roof, your siding, your windows. Is there a draft? Is there a leak? Test your power outlets. Is the structure up to code? Has there been any illegal upgrades to it without permits? And then if there is, they'll point it out. They also look and see if you've got mold, if you've got asbestos, lead pipes. We come in and look at what this house could sell in the market and condition it is today. Now, that's not saying we ignore what we see, but we're not experts. So if I'm coming into an inspection, I'm not testing your power outlets, unless it's FHA, but we're talking conventional appraisals. But I can't ignore a brown spot in your basement or discoloration of the drywall. However, we call for an inspection to happen. We don't have the we don't have the professional ability or licensure to put that in a report. So oftentimes you'll see an appraisal report that has a condition or two or three, and it's what we call subject to getting an inspection done. And it will point those items 1, 2, 3, dark spots in the basement carpet or drywall shows signs of leak. Therefore, the two get combined into what the homeowner gets the value and what the actual issues were. So going back to the 3, the assessor is basically what your county values your property to be worth for taxation purposes. That could be the closest to the appraisal. However, it's different because those are done in what they call mass appraisals. So your county executive is basically an appraiser just like me, but works for the county. They'll do an entire block. They'll take exterior photos, and then based on that, they'll derive a constant number where they apply to each square footage known on record per each property. And that's how then you get taxed pennies on per thousands of dollars of that value, and that's how your tax appraisal is conducted, that you get biannually from the county. How that differs from the appraisal, well, that county executive didn't come into your property. They didn't see your upgrades. They didn't see anything else. So it's a generic valuation for taxation purposes. So that's how the difference is between appraisers, inspectors, and assessors.
Fantastic. So what are the questions that I get from all of my buyers? And sometimes the sellers too.
Yeah.
They would ask, do you know the appraiser? Does the lender know the appraiser? What if the sellers pay the appraiser to appraise it higher? We get that a lot. The way I explain it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the way I explain it to them, it's like appraisal is more like an Uber. It's like the lenders, we submit that appraisal is needed to a system, 1 or 2 or 3 systems, like a Lyft or an Uber or whatever, right? And then whoever picks it up. The lender does not know who that is. The buyer does not know who that is, nor the seller.
Right.
Would that be a correct statement?
Absolutely. So the way it works is lenders have a pool of appraisers, and they run it through an AMC, an Appraisal Management Company. And that was put in back in the Dodd-Frank bubble of 08. The reason that was put in, it was to give independence to the appraisers so they don't communicate with the lender. So now there's a middleman called the AMC. So the lender will order the assignment. The AMC will pick that up. The AMC has a list of appraisers that cover a specific area. So in other words, they don't send you to the corner of Maryland by the border with Pennsylvania, or they don't send you into far South Virginia by Norfolk because they have other guys for that area. So in generally speaking, they'll see where your office is located and they'll do a 25-mile radius. So your assignments come in within that to keep you fresh with your data and area of expertise. Now, how they assign it, it's just like you said, it's just automatic, just random. They might come back to the same appraiser if he's done that same property.
For like refinance purposes,
right? So, but when it comes to is he working or is she working for the buyer, the seller, or the lender? For none of those. So it's the appraiser is very independent. Yeah, there's a chain of line that you get the payment, but you don't work for any of those parties. Your job is to come in with blinders on, as independent as possible, and not get influenced or affected by any of the parties that are involved in a transaction, because there's emotional investment by all three parties. The lender too. The lender has an underwriter and a loan officer. So you basically go in without any interference from any of those three parties.
Back in 2006, 2007, we used to be able to pick our appraisers. True. Here's the contract.
I remember.
Make it work. But that has changed since the
that was the Dodd-Frank law that was put in.
Okay.
So what that did was you don't pick the appraiser. The agent doesn't pick the appraiser. The lender themselves don't pick the appraiser. Even if you want to get into detail, even the AMC doesn't pick the appraiser. It's a pool of rotation. Okay. And that's how that goes. And the reason that was done is because I was just getting my feet wet in the industry when that happened. But some of the stories behind it were that agents had an appraiser in their pocket that we used constantly. And if the value didn't match or if the sale didn't go through, then they would move on to the next one and the next one. And so it was a flawed system that has since been corrected.
Great. The other thing, so I'm going to use my home as an example.
Okay. Which is beautiful.
Thank you. So I'm currently refinancing, and obviously part of the refinancing process, the property gets appraised.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We've done some improvements. I would say some improvements. So my husband was like, our home is worth this much, that much, like
right.
Beyond the number that I would probably call out, right? I myself as a real estate agent also, because I am emotionally attached to my home and I know how much I've spent on it, I felt like my home was worth a lot more than what it was appraised for, right? So the first question, because there's several questions that regarding this. For example, the updates or upgrades that I did is the fireplace thing,
mm-hmm.
the backsplash on the walls,
okay.
And we did the backyard, which grass and all of that. And obviously the front door and the basement, we finished the basement, and when it was finished, we added a bedroom. We didn't call it a kitchen, a wet bar was built in the basement. So again, the numbers are accurate. So I'm not saying they're not accurate, but as a homeowner, I'm sitting here talking to myself. I'm like saying my home is worth this much because I've done this thing. And obviously it was very underwhelming when the report came back.
Right.
So can you talk about what type of upgrades actually increase the value of your home, and what is maintenance of your home?
Sure. So that's the biggest question everybody has. The truth is there are certain upgrades that fall into maintenance. There are certain upgrades that fall into preserving the value, not increasing it. So to give you an example, roof, windows, siding, those three are a category that we don't fix until they need to be fixed. Mm-hmm. No one wakes up one day and thinks, hey, I think I'm going to put a new roof on or change the siding. Until they show deferred maintenance and issues, you have a draft on the windows, your AC is running up and down constantly, running up your bill, your roof is leaking or the insulation is not proper, then you start looking around who to get to replace it, right? So do they add value? Yes, they do. But they also fall into that category of maintenance, okay? People will say, a misconception is I changed carpets and put flooring that's hardwood or LVP, and for sure that should increase the value by $10,000 because I have a receipt for it. Well, you're preserving the value by doing that. You're not necessarily increasing it. Now, if the other thing that people also have an issue with is receipts don't equal value. So you can't go to Home Depot and have all these things, items, and then wait for the appraiser and say, hey, I did all of this. I bought it for 500. Now you add all this and I'm at 530, right? It doesn't work that way. Another thing is you could be in a declining market that even though you put all this upgrades in, the market in your neighborhood has been going down. So you're still fighting to keep up, but it's not responding to what you put in. So to answer your question, the top items will be kitchen and bath. And that's something that people do wake up one day and say, hey, I do feel like we should upgrade the kitchen. You know, we've got this 80s kitchen and everybody in the neighborhood has granite and quartz and all that. So people do that. People do the bathrooms. They'll gut them or just slowly buy all the fixtures and place them in the basement. And 1 weekend, just rip it all up and put it up. It's also a matter of how much did you pay for the labor? You know, the whole going joke is, you know, I bought a house that's brand new, told the builder, don't finish the basement. I'll do it with my friends and cousins over a weekend. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that same builder finished it for you, you're paying upwards of $55,000, $60,000 for that. So it depends on what you pay. To your property, there's a lot of questions there. It's not a simple answer. So maybe you overpaid when you bought it. Maybe the market has decreased since you bought it. And all of these are noted. If I were to appraise your house today, I would ask you a list of improvements since you've owned it. Then I would ask you a list of improvements that you know of, even though you didn't do them. So when you bought it, let's say hypothetically 2 years ago, the seller, okay, so I haven't looked it up. It's just a guess. So the seller would tell you, okay, I'm selling this house and I've done kitchen, bath, X, Y, and Z. And me as an appraiser asks you not what you put in it, but anything that's been done in the last 10 years that you know of. So you might say, hey, Gus, I didn't do the roof, but it was put brand new the year we bought it. So now as an evaluator, I know that that roof's got another 28, 30 years left. It doesn't matter if you did it or the last guy did it. It's a matter of knowing the chronological life of the upgrades and how long they have left to live. So people sometimes will feel the pressure of telling the appraiser, I've done so many things, but they're missing the big items that, you know, you've got new windows, new roof that the last seller put on for you. So, but going back to the upgrades, kitchen, bath, there's a funny phrase that says what costs the most adds the most. I hate to use it, but in a way it's somewhat true. Then there's over improvement. So you can improve the kitchen that can throw you out of your neighborhood in terms of valuation. So there's another saying that says you don't want to have the pink elephant, the best house on the block, because based on principle of regression, the comps drop that value down.
I think that's my issue.
Well, I don't know. I haven't looked at your neighborhood, but here's the other thing. You know, if the highest selling properties in the market neighborhood have a specific countertop, a specific bathroom look, and that's what's selling the highest in the whole neighborhood, which could be a mile, 5, 6, then you go and get Italian imported quartz and all these other hot items. The market participants, which is another, in layman's term, is the buyer that affects value. If the buyer is not willing to pay extra for that Italian imported stone, because then the other homes, given that everything else is equal, have that stone, but it's not that high quality, and they're not willing to pay for the difference, that's where the appraised value is based on. What is the buyer willing to pay? So my work would be, if this house was on the market tomorrow, I want to get you as many data-driven, market-derived, proven aspects of this valuation so that when you put it on the market, you know exactly what to expect. So if your neighbors have somewhat inferior stone, but it is stone on your counters, but then you've got this, you know, that you've paid the cost of import and all the luxury that comes with it. So when it comes to kitchen, it's a hot item, but there's over improvement in a lot of cases. So there's a bit of that. Kitchen, baths, the number of bathrooms, obviously it's a big thing. The more the better. Bedrooms, it's kind of so a bedroom count adjustment would apply to, say, urban areas like DC or Bethesda, where you're going from an efficiency to 1 bedroom. There's a huge difference there. But if you've got a house, 2,500 square feet somewhat, and we're adjusting for price per finished square footage, now you can split a bedroom in 2, you're not changing the square footage. So the bedroom count adjustment doesn't really apply. And if a typical buyer is looking for 3 bedrooms and you've added 4th, a 5th, it might be a diminishing return where they're not willing to pay you extra because you've gone a little above what the typical buyer in that market is looking for. So it's all about location, desirability, market reaction, market trends. It all translates to what the buyers are willing to pay. And it's the whole principal substitution. Why would a buyer pay extra given that everything else is equal for two different properties where one has slightly superior, the same stone as you touch it and clean it, but the important of where it came from, the name that comes with it and all that.
Gotcha. Curb appeal. Does that have that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I notice you have a shared driveway.
I do. Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it depends. Let's ask the buyers.
Right.
So if I were to look at that, in some market neighborhoods in our area, I haven't seen any negative adjustment or any issue with a shared driveway. As long as the backyard is private, as long as, it's enough distance from the next neighbor. Because then, me personally, I would much rather have a shared driveway and have the neighbors as far as you have them than be in a cookie cutter neighborhood where I can reach out and touch the neighbor, but I have my own driveway. So there's that.
The funny thing is, when we bought this property, I was actually showing it to a client of mine for him to buy it.
Oh, really?
And he didn't like it because of the shared driveway. I liked it because of the shared driveway. Not only the shared driveway, but it being inside, which my kids can do whatever they want.
Well, that answers it. It depends on different buyers of different, so it's all about, if you read a big, large pool of buyers and their reaction to the market, that will also give you an idea of what goes and doesn't. So for instance, there's times where you might say, hey, the house next door is listed and here's a X amount of money and mine is almost the same. So I'm just going to assume mine is the same value. Appraisal and a property valuation is based on sold, settled sales, not listings or pending sales. The reason for that is we don't know what concessions will happen between listing and settlement. You could have a 3% concession on that from list to sale. You'd be surprised, you get concessions where the seller gave a car to the buyer, or there were other issues, or there were personal property that went conveyed with it. So a listing next door in the block doesn't necessarily show value. Now, when it does sell, it's the most recent comp, but it doesn't have to be the best comp.
So usually in about 20 years of doing this business, when we as agents find some sort of a challenge that maybe an appraiser missed, right? The appraisers never change or adjust their appraisal. Why is that?
So now, obviously I can't speak for others, but in my case, we're all human.
Yeah.
I miss things. I've had rebuttals where we've changed it. We've gone back and said, hey, we missed that. Absolutely. Now, do most of them support it and stick to the value? Yeah, because there's an underwriter-based market-derived valuation method that the appraiser's producing. Yeah. And then there's a realtor and a buyer emotionality investment that goes with it. But no, there's cases where, an underwriter will pick up something that I missed. There's cases where the homeowner will just come back and say, hey, what about X, Y, and Z? And then we go and relook and say, yeah, we missed that. We'll revise it. So that happens. Not as often. Now, you do have other cases where, without getting into too many specifics, I had a seller that came back and said nothing about the comparable location or selection, but one of the comparables was turquoise green. And part of the rebuttal was he compared my house to a turquoise green house. Nobody would buy that, which is, you don't change the value for that. There's no data on the market that says that the color of the house should sell for more or less. So there's those kind of rebuttals too.
So the rebuttals that have a specific value, if you missed a bathroom or you...
Oh, absolutely.
Like that, that's an adjustment.
Oh, absolutely.
Just because of the coloring or something.
Like we touched on that earlier. We all think our home's the best.
Yeah.
If you ask me, my house is the best on the block too. That's just the way people think. Yeah. But
just like our children are the prettiest.
But if you step out of that, and again, to go back to your question, there are rebuttals so when you get an appraisal report, let me just backtrack. It's not just from my hand to the settlement of the buyer and seller. It goes through a rigorous review process. It goes back to that AMC that ordered it. And they have appraisers who have been doing this far longer, but don't want to be in the field. And their job now is solely to review cases. When they clear it, then it goes to the lender.
Is that quality control?
Quality assurance, yes.
Quality assurance.
So that goes to the lender after they pass. Lender, on the other hand, could be Wells Fargo or Chase. They have their own appraisers who are senior appraisers that review it. And when they clear it, then it goes back to the buyer and seller through their agent. So they cross it through a lot of sets of eyes. So It's very rare that a missed bathroom will pass those and end up to the listing agent. They'll pick it up before anybody else.
Okay.
And we get revisions all the time. It could be explain how you did it. And the methodology that I use is when you completed a whole assignment, you got to explain what you did, why you did it, and how you did it. Why did you go that far? Well, there weren't enough data in this market. Why aren't you adjusting for location of these comps that are on the other side of 95 or the Beltway? And how did you do the adjustments? How did you come up with these adjustments? So what you did, how you did it, and why you did it. Those are three things that if you cover those, and again, it's not something that is pulled out of a hat. It's always, it's backed up by data in the market. And it's almost like a homeowner will say, well, Zillow says my house is worth.
I'm so glad you said that because that's my next question.
So Zillow, Redfin, all of these, what they are is basically AVMs. So it's an automated valuation method. Sometimes they're close to the actual value. That would apply into newer homes, more cookie cutter neighborhoods that have sold in the last 6 months, 30 of those models, and it picks up that. It's driven by public data, which oftentimes could be accurate on new subdivisions. But you go into a subdivision that was built in the 70s or 80s or a rural setting or waterfront properties, it could be way off. So where that differs from the actual appraisal, again, going back to a human being coming into your house and talking to you and taking photographs and looking at everything that's good or bad about that property. The other thing is, in rural markets, some of that data is very old. And if Zillow or Redfin runs that in their algorithms, it may not be as credible. We find it that rural and waterfront properties have very limited data, even with an appraiser going in and doing it, boots on the ground, as they say. So we still have to use some older data, but you adjust for the market reaction on that.
So you're absolutely going to be fixing or not fixing a husband-wife issue here. So my husband wants to put a pool in our backyard.
Let's talk about that.
See, I personally, live in the DMV area, so we only have 3 to 4 months of good weather for us to be able to use it. Maintenance is expensive, in my opinion, also for the limited time that we get to use it. However, his last case was, what? It will increase the value of our home. I said, no, it does not. What do you say?
And you're the realtor. Now, who do you think I'm going to lean on? Now, that's a very good question. And that there's two topics that I get asked all the time, and that is pool, solar panels. So you're licensed in Maryland,
yes.
And anytime you go into Prince George's County, the incentives that the county gives to homeowners to buy solar are huge. So it's almost a no-brainer. Why not? Right? So most of the appraisals in Prince George's County, I would say 7 out of 10 homes have solar panels on them. Now, the problem is when these solar companies come to your door and sell you that, what they don't tell you is that they'll pitch you the sale of it will increase your value. But what they don't tell you is that it will increase your value when you own them. And it takes a long time to own them. The average American will make payments up to 15 years on those solar panels. And you always have to pay to who owns the grid. Is it Dominion? Is it Pepco? You'll never not have a bill because that current is run through what they have that they own and that there's their easement. So, and then homeowners get discouraged because then you walk in and they say, hey, I also have solar panels. And the number one thing that we always ask is, do you have a title or a deed, just like you would for a car? 90% of them are still making payments. They're either leasing them or they're paying them as you go. Well, that's not your item. It doesn't belong to the property. It doesn't add value. It's no different than a personal item that has no value. Right. And then the other thing is, if you fell into hardship and stop payments, they will repossess it. But when they do that, you need a new roof because you have over 200 or 400 nails in that roof. Going back to paying in full, if you have the means and you pay up front, 30, 40,000, you don't get that in value because not everybody will pay you for that. Also, the cost that is added to that 30, 40,000 is the installation and the labor. A buyer doesn't look at that. A buyer looks at what does it add to my home. And sometimes you might lose that buyer. The main thing is when you're releasing them or making payments, you have a young couple that's crunching numbers. Can we afford this house? Can we offer them this other one? This one's out of our range. Then finally they find the one that they think they like. Numbers seem right. They can afford it. Then you go into the under contract, and then the seller says, well, by the way, you need to pick up the payments for could be $200 to $300. Well, now you lose that buyer because they could hardly afford a house.
Exactly.
So the way it works is when you list the property, you want to broaden that exposure to 100% of the buyer's pool. And I mean everyone, from the investors to the flippers to the young couples to the couples that are downsizing, kids have gone to college. That's the 100% of the pool. Now, think of it as a graph of a pie shape. You start missing certain sections by, I have solars. Now you lose a percentage of those people. Going back to the pool, not everybody wants a pool. And I'm not agreeing with her just to agree with her, but there's data behind it. And the data behind it is this. In our area, if you don't have it heated, you might as well not have one, because those 3 months, then it goes to 2 months. So if it's heated, you're looking at an electric bill that goes high. You're also looking at your insurance. Property insurance companies love to see that you got a pool because there's more risk, there's more hazard. So your insurance goes up, your bill's up. And a young couple with a newborn baby, they might find that too risky. They might find that too dangerous. They might find it that, hey, one day we want to run a daycare or have our nieces and nephews come and play. You got to always be on the watch. So you lose another piece of that pie of the 100% of the buyer's pool. So those are the items that people that put them on sometimes that didn't buy the house with a pool, they added themselves. There's two categories. There's the ones that say, I know it doesn't add much value, but I want it. And I have kids that come every summer and enjoy it. That's fine. And then there's others that say, I'm going to increase the value. And they're in for kind of a rude awakening, because the average pool around here will range anywhere between $50,000 to $100,000. Does it add that? Absolutely not. But those are the things that, when it comes to solar, pool, are things that, and depend on the market. They may add some value. In some markets, believe it or not, a solar panel paid off may not add anything, because there's no reaction to buyers paying more for paid off solars. People have this idea that, well, if I own them one day, I can take them with me because they're mine. You could, but then you'd have to find a property that has almost identical kilowattage per hour usage than the one that you sold, which is a needle in a haystack. But let's say that happens. Then you'd have to remove them. Then at the old house, you got to put a new roof. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that goes with it. And like I said earlier, if it's just like a car, if you don't own it, you can't loan against or borrow against it unless you get that title.
The other thing also regarding solar, it may make sense. If this is a home that you're going to be in 10, 15, 20 years, it may make sense, right? Because you're saving on utilities. However, for example, the Upper Marlboro townhome that I was selling, buyers were coming, buyers were making offers. However, we were losing them because there was about $100 payment per month for it. So their debt to income ratio was too tight for them to buy it.
A solar might be beneficial. Now that would be, nowadays, a lot of people work from home. A lot of people run businesses from home. Believe it or not, there's businesses in Frederick County, Maryland, that are run out of the property that do sew uniforms for, whether it being first responders, and those run on a lot of electricity. You have 30, 40 machines just constantly working. That's where a solar panel would benefit. Or if you're running something that generates a lot of power. This might seem extreme, but if you're doing Bitcoin, what do they call that? Mining Bitcoin. That eats up a lot of your energy. And then you need coolants for that. You need water running through the system and everything. That's when the solar panel would benefit, because you know that, okay, I'm making $300 payments a month, but what it's saving me on my bill is huge, so it's worth it. But on an average, mom, dad, 2 kids, it's a toss-up.
Let's talk about the outdoor improvements. Mm-hmm. This is truly a personal question for me, because we do have a really nice backyard, but most importantly, it is also our community likes to spend a lot of time outside. Our community likes to have events and parties and things like that. So in my opinion, I feel like if you're going to do upgrades, it shouldn't be just focused on increasing the value of the home. It needs to also be functional for you. Right. So as I mentioned to you earlier, I try really hard not to hang out with my husband outside because every time we do, he's like, pool right here, pergola right there, kitchen right here. Like, he's that kind of person. He does. So we said pool is not good for us, but would you say putting like a pergola, not bougie, but it's like nice pergola outside, and also doing a nice outdoor kitchen to grill and all that stuff, would it increase the value?
Absolutely. I think summer kitchens and data shown in our market areas, summer kitchens always have a big uptick. And it's also not just whether you like to barbecue or not, but think about a birthday party for kids. Think about, your oven can only hold so much, but you have an extra one outside. Or think about you're frying or cooking something that you don't want to, right.
Especially our food.
And if you ask me personally, and my wife and I, we love to cook, it's also one of those things where you have an extra set of, it's like a second kitchen, but outdoors, where you would already have a patio on the deck. You just added something that maybe cost you a few $1,000s, but now that patio on deck is fully complete with a whole summer kitchen. So now it's a whole different appeal. And even if the buyer, if you list it, doesn't like to cook, that's still something that they know has value, that they're willing to pay for it. Now, how much you pay to put that kitchen in there is a different story. What the reaction of the market is a different story, depending on the neighborhood you're in. There are neighborhoods but you expect to have that because everybody else has it. There are neighborhoods that nobody has an outdoor kitchen, but you enjoy it and you do it. The bottom line on that, to me, would be absolutely beneficial. Now, keep in mind, nothing gives dollar per dollar value. What it costs, you don't get that in return. Like I said earlier, receipts don't equal equity. But if you can recuperate a portion of that and enjoy it, to me, that's worth the investment.
And sometimes actually what you spend versus what you gain in equity could also be higher, depending on what it is. From what you just mentioned, in some areas it makes sense. Like, for example, a pool would probably make sense in a high-end neighborhood where everybody has a pool, right?
Where it's expected and it's conforming, and most of the buyers looking at properties there, it will appeal to that buyer pool because they're already looking at your competing properties, which have all these amenities. So then they come to the subject and they feel discouraged because they just saw 5 houses that day that had a pool and everything else. So depending on the neighborhood.
Absolutely. Obviously, the sales price of the property too. Like if you're spending $5 million, you probably want all of these things, right?
Absolutely.
So it totally makes sense. So I'm going to share with you how I explain appraisal to my clients.
Okay.
It's kind of funny, but if you like it, you could use it. I'm giving you permission already. So like I tell my clients, buyers, that is, for a buyer, I personally believe that an appraisal value in the buying process matters so much. And the way I explain it is, let's say you have a daughter and your wife gets pregnant with your second child. Obviously, you want a boy because you already have a girl.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you want a healthy child. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? So the way I explain it to them is, if the property is valued right on the nose of what you're buying it for, is a healthy baby and we're all good to go. Right. If the property is valued higher, you got the boy or whatever gender you wanted, you got that. And if it's undervalued, you just had another girl. So there's really no issue here for a buyer, because you could always negotiate the price down if you have the contingency. Yeah, if you contingency, so you get the girl.
Absolutely.
And if it's higher, you walk in with equity, so you got the gender that you were looking for.
Right.
And if it's on the nose, all of them are healthy babies, but like you have a healthy baby and you're good to go, is the way I explain it.
Sounds pretty accurate to me.
Yeah.
The thing is, as a buyer, looking at it from the buyer's view, if it comes shorter and you really want it, the lender will not give you a dime more than what the appraised value is. So the lender will still lend you that money, but not more than what it appraised for. So if you really want it, there's several options, as you know. You can go back to the negotiating table with the seller, see if you can work some out, or you can put the rest out of pocket. And sometimes you walk away from it and move on to the next thing. So that's that. If it comes on the nose, obviously, like you said, healthy babies and all. But if it comes higher, then you walk in thinking, okay, I'm walking in with equity. So it's a win-win. Now, on the seller's point, there's also ways to not lose the buyer. So, for instance, I do a lot of pre-listed appraisals for realtors.
glad you mentioned.
So pre-listing appraisals is 9 out of 10. Most of the realtors that I've worked with, I've been so blessed that in the DMV area, there's some really skilled realtors that know their craft and they're grounded in terms of they know how to separate emotion from commission from losing a client. I've even met some that have walked away from a potential client because they didn't see it going to, I'm sure you've got stories on that. But the pre-listing appraiser comes in, same as, by the way, the appraisal process is the exact same thing for any reason, any purpose, whether you're doing estate, refinance, purchase, buying, selling, pre-listing, it's the same report, the same analysis. Nothing changes about it. So in a pre-listing appraisal, I will meet the realtor, we'll talk, we'll do the inspection. And in that analysis, I will point out that if the buyers are demanding closing cost help and getting it, how much is that in percentage? And I'll point that out. So hypothetically, the house appraised at 500, but all the market data shows that 2% has been given to 12 months of sales in that neighborhood and closing costs help, seller concessions. So I'll point it out to the listing agent and say, it's valued at 500, but you could add this 2% to the list price, knowing that you might have to give it back and not lose the buyer. Now that listing agent will go to the seller, their client, and say, okay, we can list it such, but we don't have to lose buyers because we're already listing 2% higher, which is the average asking price for concessions. That way, it's kind of a match made in heaven because you don't scare off the buyer. Everybody's happy. The seller knows they're not underselling. It's just something standard. That's one way. The other way is, people always, when the appraisal comes short, the seller can change the concessions that they're given and maintain the same contract price. So there's that too.
Speaking of concessions, you look at that too in the appraisal process.
Of course. Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, the net sale price from the gross sale price are two different.
And that's why you wait until the sale is complete.
So going back to the neighbor next door, concessions being a listing and pending sale versus a settled sale, that's vague. That's a little blinded. But in a settled sale, everything's public, as you know. So if I'm seeing a sale where 3% equating to $35,000, we're given in closing cost help, we subtract that and then you get the net sale of that property. Then you begin the adjustments because it didn't sell for the gross, even though MLS may show that, but the net sale price is what matters. That's what the buyer had to pay because they got a kickback in concessions. Yeah. The other thing in pre-listing appraisals that I always focus on is market exposure. Predominantly comparables of the subject that I'm working on. Are they listing and staying on the market 45 days, 60 days, 90 days? That's very important, as you know, to know and present to your seller client, because if you list at the appraised value, and I've already put in a report that these homes list and stay on the market for up to 90 days, that means that you don't have to panic. You can tell the seller, we don't have to lower the price. Predominantly, they do sit for that much. Once you start lowering the price, I'm sure you know, people start offering even less and less because now you're dropping. But if you know that predominantly they list for 90 days, then you can just go to your client and say, we don't have to drop the price. Let's just do the whole 90 days because that's what market exposure is.
So you brought up a very good point. I mean, with this, we can do this for hours. Really quickly, pre-listing appraisal. Do we call an appraiser like you that we know, or do we have to go through AFC? Like, how does that work?
No, you can hire an appraiser privately.
You can.
Yeah, you can go into any Thumbtack, Home Advisor, or people that you've known in the industry. I get calls from listing agents all the time, and whether you know me or not, it's not going to affect my work here.
Of course not.
Because we're both working for the same solution, get an accurate value.
Perfect. The only reason I'm asking that is because earlier in the lending process, we were mentioning to them that it's like an Uber where it gets sent out and get picked up. But if someone wants to do a pre-listing, they would have to talk to their agent to locate an appraiser.
An agent will find
an appraiser.
An agent will find one for them. And that appraiser, when they sign their report, and their digital signature is there and their license there, well, that's a big oath and ethics that you've done absolutely everything market derived. There's no discrepancies. You're not doing anything else other than what the market dictates. So with that in mind, you get pre-listing orders and you separate the relationship you have with Hermela or Gus or anybody. You just stick solely to the job. And when you go under contract, that lender of the buyer will send their own appraiser that was back to the Uber. So now I always encourage agents in the pre-list and appraisal that when it comes to that juncture that the lender's appraisals come in, show them my report. You're not influencing the other guy or girl. What you're telling them is that I'm a well-informed homeowner and my agent went and got me an appraisal and this is where the house came in as of last month. Me personally, I've walked into many contract situations where the homeowner says, hey, my agent could make it, but we had it appraised last week. And they'll show a copy and I'll take a look at it. You're not influencing the person. You're just showing them that we backed this up somewhere. We didn't just, right. We didn't just throw it out of.
However, good thing you mentioned is that the pre-listing appraisal report cannot be used or shared to the lender for them to use that instead. They have to order their own.
And no lender will use that regardless, no matter what you tell them. I've been on the panel of the lender and I was hired privately and the lender has my credentials. I'm in their pool of appraisal and it was still order it randomly.
And do it again.
Yeah. And they would make sure that my name was excluded out of that list because they would want somebody other than me.
Other than you.
And it has to be routinely done in due process of routine assignment, whether you have it done yesterday or last week. And that's the way it goes. But 2 good appraisals that are done completely in market derived should not be off by more than 5%. And the reason for that is you have a little change there is because some appraisers' data may show a bathroom adjustment at $20,000. The other person's will be $15,000. Or like the price per acreage may be $100,000 per acre on one data set, depending on what market boundaries they put. The other one could be in the 80s or 90s. So, but those are things that are sort of considered into the cost of doing business. There's always going to be some wiggle room, but within 5%, in my experience, every lender will consider the 2 of them accurate.
See, honestly, a lot of good information was shared today, but most important thing that you shared today is the pre-listing appraisal, especially for our community. ቤታችሁን ለመሸጥ በምታስቡበት ጊዜ ገማች ቀጥራችሁ ቤታችሁን አስቀድማችሁ ማስገመት በምን ያህል ዋጋ መሸጥ እንዳለባችሁ ያሳውቃችኋል። ምን ያህል ጊዜም ሊፈጅ እንደሚችል ቤቱን ለመሸጥ ያሳውቃችኋል። ይሄ ጥሩ ኢንፎርሜሽን ነው። ከኤጀንታችሁም ጋራ ያላችሁ ሪሌሽንሽፕ ጥሩ ይሆናል። ኦን ታፕ ኦፍ ዳት ደግሞ የቤታችሁም ዋጋ በሶስተኛ ወገን ተገምቶ ዋጋው ሲነገራችሁ ልትተማመኑበት ትችላላችሁ። ሪል ስቴት ኤጀንታችሁ ጋራ በምትሰሩበት ጊዜ ቤቴ 700,000 ነው የሚያወጣ ትሉናላችሁ አይደለም? እኛ ደግሞ ነው 600 ነው የሚያወጣው እንላለን። የዛኔ ሌላ ኤጀንት ጋር ሄዳለሁ የምንለው ነገር አለ። ከዛ ሌላ ኤጀንት ጋር ትሄዱና ደግሞ ለመሸጥ ታቀርቡትና ገዢ ጠፍቶ 60 ቀን 90 ቀን ማርኬት ላይ ቆይቶ ታነሱታላችሁ። እሱ እንዳይሆን ገንዘባችሁ ይጭነቀው አውጡና አፕሬዛል አስደርጋችሁ ቤታችሁን እውነተኛ ዋጋውን እንዲሁም ደግሞ ምን አይነት እድሳቶች ብታደርጉለት ዋጋው ሊጨምር እንደሚችል ታውቃላችሁ ከዚህ ገማች ማለት ነው። ሶ ገንዘቡ ካላችሁ ወጪውን አውጥታችሁ አስተካክላችሁ ከፍ ያለ ዋጋ ለመጠየቅ ትችላላችሁ። ካልሆነ ግን በሚያወጣ ዋጋ ሊስት አድርጋችሁት ገዢ በቶሎ አግኝታችሁ ወደሚቀጥለው ጉዟችሁ መሄድ ትችላላችሁ ማለት ነው። Basically what I'm trying to say is a lot of time, especially me, I recommend pre-listing appraisals, but they're looking at Zillow, they're looking at Redfin, and they feel like they know the value of the home. But can you tell us what is the approximate cost for someone to get their home appraised?
So that's a good question. Oftentimes people will say, well, really that much for a tiny condo? Or like, I expect you to charge more because it's 5,000 square feet. The size of the property has nothing to do with it. What has to do with it is the market. Is a market that has data? Because there's markets where people don't sell homes. They sit there and they live for long times. So the data has to be either from outside the neighborhood or it has to be data going back 2-3 years. So the more man hours are put into that evaluation, that derives the cost. It's not necessarily that you have a 5,000 square foot home versus a townhouse. There are townhouses in Chevy Chase that there's no sales in the last 3 years because it's Chevy Chase.
Yep.
And it's still a townhouse. But then you've got markets like, north of Rockville into Boyd's and that area where a big 5,000 square foot colonial, there's comps all over because people have bought and sold, seen the increase and moved on and pulled the equity. So the average cost, and this is not because you go into Thumbtack and all these websites, they do the national average. But in our DMV area, to be more accurate, you're looking at anywhere between $400 to $600.
From accurate.
And to go back to touch a little bit on the from the buyers, I mean, from the seller's perspective, I don't think we spoke enough of that. As a seller or in a refinance appraisal, some of the things would be that if you want to help the appraiser out, have a list of things that have been done, whether by you or the last homeowner, if you have recently bought it. Have a list prepared and don't weed out anything. Let the appraiser decide what is important, what matters, and what doesn't. You could have something as silly as upward blinds or a central wired Alexa system. Just put it all in there. On the internet, if you Google it, they'll say declutter your home. I don't care about that. Because you could have boxes on everything. I'm looking at, is there hardwood? Is it LVP? Is it carpet underneath that? You don't have to even make your bed for the appraiser to come. People always say, well, don't come tomorrow because, you know, I work late and I need to clean the house. You don't have to clean the house. What we're looking at is, do you have stone, Corian countertops, or do you have vinyl? Do you have bathroom fixtures that are tile, ceramic, stone, or is it the fiberglass? Those are the things that we're looking at on the interior. Another thing that could help a lot is if you have an ongoing project, finish it. If you're putting that wet bar in the basement and you haven't done the plumbing, but it's there structurally, it'll ding to your value because it's not completed. So you might as well finish any ongoing projects that you got going, whether, you know, the husband's putting a microwave on and then the wires are exposed. Well, that's a health and safety hazard. Now you're going back to the lender saying they need to do X, Y, and Z. You're slowing down the process. So any ongoing projects have to be finished. And the most important thing is don't do anything illegally, meaning don't put a bathroom without a permit. Don't put a kitchen in a basement without a permit. The reason for that is it will always be picked up. But the appraiser will ask you, you have this kitchen in the basement. Has it been there? No, I'll put it in. Okay, did you pull permits? Well, everybody has it. I didn't have to. The problem is that we don't know that the building code and zoning was followed into that addition. We don't know what the wire's gauge is. Could it heat up and affect fire? We don't know what the plumbing is. Could it leak? We don't know the PSI pressure of that neighborhood. So having the permit gives you peace of mind. And also you can, because they'll ask for the permit. And also you can tell to the buyer or the appraiser or the home inspector, here's the permit. Everything was done in accordance with Fairfax County building and zoning code. So anything illegal only hurts.
Perfect. But if you did it legally, just have the building, the approvals. Guys, I cannot thank you enough. Honestly, and especially because I just got my house appraised. It's so fresh, and we see so many appraisal reports, and so many different things have popped up in the last few months that we haven't seen previously. So again, thank you so much for coming and doing this. So Gus is local, DMV area. ቤት መሸጥ ያሰባችሁ ሰዎች ካላችሁ በሚቀጥለው 12 ወር ውስጥ ቤት የመሸጥ ፕላን ያለው ሰው ቤቱን መጀመሪያ ቢያስገምተው የተሻለ ነው የሚሆነው። የሚያወጣበትን ዋጋ ያውቀዋል። ምን ያህል ጊዜም ሊፈጅ እንደሚችል ሽያጩ ታውቁታላችሁ ማለት ነው። ወጪውም ደግሞ በጣም አነስተኛ ነው። ከ400 እስከ $600 ነው የሚያስወጣው። Gus, please tell them about you and where they can find you.
Sure. So Alpha Appraisers, LLC. You can find us on Google. My email direct is alphaappraisers0125@gmail.com. And my direct number is 571-247-4929. So any of those three contacts, I answer every call and email, regardless of the time. And that's pretty much it.
Wally, and thank you again.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
This was really good, but I'm not going to thank you so much. But I'm not going to listen to appraisal value, but I'm ብዙ ጊዜ ወስደን ያወራ ነው ግን ይሄ በጣም important topic ነው because ስለ ቤታችሁ value ስለሆነ ነው. Thank you for joining us. D Harris and Associates on D Harris at D Harris on Facebook, D Harris the Realtor on TikTok and on Instagram.
Well, thank you again. Hermela Balcha ነኝ Facebook ላይ the Balcha group Facebook ላይ YouTube ላይ the Balcha group, Instagram the Balcha group, TikTok the Balcha group. Again, thank you so much for joining us on episode 14. Can't wait to see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you.